Hello again. My name is Catherine Majewski, but please call me Kasia. I, along with Marika Maz, are part of the team from Kyoto University researching the invasive tanuki on Chiburijima. We started our research on Chiburijima with the help of the Oki UNESCO Geopark in 2023, and this year we wanted to continue what we started before, while also expanding some of our research questions. Our main goals were to examine tanuki behavior at latrine sites and compare these behaviors to other areas where raccoon dogs are invasive, to quantify which other species are interacting with tanuki latrines and how they are interacting with them, to examine the dung beetle diversity associated with latrines, to examine the behavior of tanuki at feeding and watering sites on Akahageyama, an important area for cattle farming on Chiburijima, and finally, to perform a public perception survey about how the local people view tanuki on the island. But let's start at the very beginning by introducing tanuki and our broader research. Tanuki are native to mainland Japan, but were introduced to two islands in the last century: Chiburijima in the Okidozen archipelago and Yakushima in Kagoshima prefecture. We began our research studying invasive tanuki in Yakushima in 2021 and expanded our study to Chiburijima in 2023 to better understand the similarities and differences between the invasions on these two islands. Yakushima and Chiburijima may seem like very different places. The dominant species on each island are different, but both islands have been invaded by tanuki, and their invasion is poorly understood. In Yakushima, the introduction period is unclear, although some estimates suggest it was as early as the 1980s. In Chiburijima, the introduction is well documented, occurring in the 1940s. Along with the tanuki came a byproduct of their introduction: latrines. Tanuki are unique in that they are the only latrine-forming canid. These latrines can be considered as a type of habitat modification. And we started to wonder about the animals on each island that may be benefiting from these latrines as sites where food may be abundant. So beginning in 2022 on Yakushima and 2023 in Chiburijima, we installed camera traps and collected samples from the latrines to see which species of animals are interacting with these latrines. We observed many species interacting with latrines, including weasels, cows, small mammals, and birds in Chiburijima, as well as weasels, small mammals, birds, monkeys, and deer in Yakushima. The first animal that interacts with latrines frequently, of course, are tanuki themselves, as they visit the latrines to defecate. Our analysis of over 15,000 videos collected over 1,311 days in Yakushima and Chiburijima shows us an interesting difference between the two islands. While tanuki are described as mostly nocturnal, or sometimes crepuscular, meaning active in the morning and evening, the tanuki on Chiburijima seem to be active all day and all night at their latrine sites, whereas the tanuki in our study site in Yakushima seem to be active only at night, as we would expect to see. We found this difference in behavioral patterns to be statistically significant between the two islands. As far as we know, the population of tanuki on Chiburijima may be the only wild population of tanuki which is active during the day. This finding is probably not a surprise to the residents of Chiburijima who see the tanuki all the time. And we suspect that human activity is at least part of the reason why tanuki have changed their behavior so much here, Specifically, we think they're being driven by the feeding times of the cows on the island. Marie will talk about that in her research a bit later on. But I also have another theory as well for tanuki who are active at latrines even some distance away from cattle feeding stations. It's possible that the density of tanuki on Chiburijima is very high, and so the tanuki must forage for longer as they compete with each other for food, without worrying about any natural predators or competition from other species. In Yakushima, tanuki also don't have any natural predators. But the island is much larger, and perhaps food in the forest is more abundant, and the population of tanuki might be much less dense, so they can get enough food just by foraging at night. Tanuki weren't the only species we observed at latrines. On both Yakushima and Chiburijima, we observed small mammals, specifically rodents, foraging for food in latrines. We found that, compared to foraging behavior outside of latrines in Yakushima, small mammals are more likely to forage at latrine sites than at non-latrine sites, and the rate of foraging in Chiburijima latrines is similar to those of Yakushima latrines. We also observed birds foraging at latrine sites in Chiburijima and Yakushima, although there were far fewer birds foraging in Yakushima latrines than in Chiburijima. Foraging in latrines may be causing the transmission of parasites and diseases from tanuki to these species. It may also be impacting the population size of these species. If more latrines, for example, means more food for small mammals, it may mean that small mammal populations could be increasing. These types of questions require much more research. Our camera traps were able to detect larger species at the latrines. But what about those species they couldn't detect, such as insects? From the moment I saw the first tanuki latrine, I started wondering about how this rich resource could be impacting species of scavengers. This year, I was able to do some analysis on one particular group of insects I found at latrines: dung beetles. I found dung beetles on both islands. I collected 180 beetle individuals from Yakushima latrines and 193 from Chiburijima latrines, but the diversity I found between the two locations was different. After performing a genetic analysis where I was able to genetically identify over 200 of my beetle samples, I found a total of 5 different species. While I found all 5 species of dung beetles on Yakushima, in Chiburijima there was only one, Onthophagus atropenis, which is found in latrines on both islands. The other 4 species were Onthophagus phodians, Onthophagus lenzii, Onthophagus ater, and Caxobius brevis. All of these beetles are referred to as tunneling species, meaning that they tunnel underneath fecal deposits they find with pieces of feces and deposit their eggs on their fecal food source. Some species of tunneling dung beetle have been linked to higher germination rates in certain plants, as along with the feces, they bury any seeds that were deposited in the animal waste. If tanuki have a different diet to the native species on these islands, I wonder if they're selecting different plants to eat as well. And if in turn, the beetles are changing the plant community composition over time by burying the seeds they find in the tanuki feces. Additionally, I wonder if subsidizing dung beetle populations changes things like the decomposition rates of other waste and carrion in these habitats as well. These are all other research topics which will require further investigation. And this is just a small look into how the tanuki introduction may have impacted native species of wildlife. Their impact on the lives of the people who live here is also important to study, and was part of our focus for this year.
Indeed, as part of my master's degree at the University of Strasbourg in France and in collaboration with Kyoto University, I had the opportunity to work on Chiburijima and explore the impact of tanuki on people's daily lives. We specifically focused on the activity patterns of tanukis in a particular location, Akahageyama. We chose this site because it has significant cattle farming activity. Cows are fed there, and water stations are also available for them to drink. As the tanuki is an opportunistic animal, meaning it can adapt to a wide range of living conditions, it may tend to take advantage of easily accessible resources, such as those provided by humans for their livestock. In Chiburijima, we observed that tanukis, typically a nocturnal species, are highly visible during the day. We therefore wanted to determine whether this change in activity was related to the island's agricultural activities. To investigate this, we used camera traps placed at various strategic locations, including feeding areas and water stations, within a specific perimeter around Akahageyama. In addition to this, I also conduct numerous days of on-site observation to study the behavior and activity of tanukis more precisely in their environment. These observations allowed us to measure tanuki activity over a 24-hour period. What we observed is that their activity around this site is concentrated mainly during the day, particularly in two time slots, around 10 am and around 5 pm in the late afternoon. But thanks to camera traps, we were also able to observe human and cattle activity at these sites. And when we compare the activity of humans, cattle, and tanukis, we see that they are active at the same time during the same peak period. Indeed, these activity peaks correspond to the cattle feeding times at this site. The overlap of different activity patterns shows the tanuki's ability to adapt to the environments they colonize, in particular by taking advantages of the livestock resources provided by humans. In fact, tanukis are opportunistic animals that eat the food that is easiest to catch and develop adaptive feeding behavior. Furthermore, islands like Chiburijima are closed ecosystems and do not provide many alternative food sources, which can therefore favor opportunistic and adaptive tanuki behavior. However, we observed a decline in this activity and opportunistic behavior in spring. It would therefore be relevant to examine whether this type of behavior changes throughout the year, depending on the seasons and the availability of resources. Moreover, we have only observed their behavior around agricultural sites. But what about their activity directly within the different districts of Chiburijima? To get an idea of this, we conduct a survey. Thanks to the participation of Chiburijima's residents, we were able to investigate both the presence of tanukis on the island and the local perception of them. We distributed questionnaires across the different districts of the island and collected a total of 66 responses. First, the survey confirmed our initial impressions. Most respondents see tanukis at least once a day or several times a week, at various times throughout the day. However, they report seeing them most frequently in the evening and at night. It also confirmed that observing interactions between tanuki and cows is fairly common. The most frequently observed behavior was tanukis sharing food with cattle, followed by tanukis using the same water sources as cows. This shows that tanukis exploit cattle resources. These observations align with our hypothesis. During the day, tanukis seek food around livestock farms, while in the evening, their natural activity resumes and they return to the village where they can find other food resources. For our study, we assessed residents' perceptions of tanukis, asking what the word tanuki evoked. The general opinion was mostly negative, with some positive views. Negative associations included nuisance and pest, while positive ones linked tanukis to giggly and fluffy. Furthermore, when we asked respondents how they believed tanukis affected livestock, pets, crop and livestock profits, and the biodiversity of Chiburijima, almost all responses were negative, particularly regarding the impact on crop and livestock profits. These negative opinions are likely linked to the issues faced by the residents of Chiburijima. Indeed, the most common problems are the destruction of kitchen gardens, intrusions into homes and gardens, and noise. However, in terms of frequency, the most encountered issues are picking through garbage cans, contact with livestock, and stealing food. It is therefore important to implement solutions. Many residents are already doing this. However, most of solutions are considered ineffective by the residents, except for extermination, traps, and some nets. Management measures must be considered to find solutions for both Chiburijima residents and tanukis. Over half of those who support population management are willing to contribute physically or financially, creating a strong foundation for implementing measures and encouraging dialogue. There are still many possibilities for future research and solutions in Chiburijima. For instance, we would like to use GPS collars on tanukis to better understand their movement and test measures to keep them away from kitchen gardens and homes. Thanks to you, we have obtained some very promising initial results, and we would like to express our gratitude to our collaborators as well as all the residents of Chiburijima who contribute, whether directly or indirectly, to this research.
We hope you enjoyed this research update from the Okitan team. We would like to thank the Oki Islands Geopark and the community on Chiburijima for all of your assistance in this project. We look forward to continuing to work with you into the future.